Yeah, it says it now.
Now live. Hi, I'm John from Broadsheet. You're very welcome to Tomorrow Tonight. We're joined by Public Affairs Consultant and Broadsheet columnist Derek Mooney. Good evening, Derek.
Hi, John. You well?
I'm very well, thank you. Quiet news day, in a way. And your column today was on basically, essentially, Robert Watts.
Yeah, I wanted to stay away from the personalities because the issue wasn't, is he the right guy, is he not the right guy, is he worth 80,000, is he not worth 80,000?
Yeah.
It is, look, is there a better way of doing this? Why is this? The rationale behind this, I just still find it a little bit hard to grasp. We're saying, well, look, because the head of the HSE is paid more and this one's paid more, they should be paid more, but those pay rates are decided by the government. Why is the government basically bidding up top civil service pay, and what is that? What's the drag factor on that? And also, why is there a vacancy in the Department of Health in the middle of the pandemic?
Yeah, for months.
Since last July, yeah.
Yeah, and nothing to do with Robert Watt. What is his package now, though? I mean, what's
I'm not too sure. I think it's Secretary General of the Department. I think it starts at 199 and goes up to 220k. And I think they're talking about this will end up as another
260.
No, it's another 80,000 as far as I know.
Yeah, it's a big.
No, but by the way, it's not specifically for Robert Watt. My understanding is Robert Watt goes in as the acting Secretary General of the Department of Health, and then the Department of Health will recruit a new Secretary General. It could well be the acting Secretary General.
Right. So for his interim payment,
would be what he's paid originally, what it would be his existing salary. So.
All right. Okay.
That's my understanding. I could well be wrong on that. I didn't want to go into the detail of that because.
Yeah, and I realized you didn't want to go.
I didn't want to go because it's not about whether is this person worth or that person worth, because that's a HR issue, and that's not something. I mean, in terms of it's the one thing I kind of know something about. In terms of that is not nobody's pay rate should be discussed in public. I mean, elected officials and other matter, etc. But in terms of an individuals. And particularly if somebody who's moving between the private sector and the public sector, that's something that they negotiate. That's a fair process. But I'm just saying, as a process, as a procedure, as a way of doing business, this doesn't appear to me to look great. And I think it's a very hard sell for people at the moment, particularly when you look at nurses' pay or their student nurses' pay and a whole range of other issues. When you saying to somebody is getting a pay increase of 80,000.
Yeah, when you say it's bidding against itself, how do you mean?
Well, I mean, but one of the rationales behind this is they're saying, well, look, we need to pay this rate because we discovered when we recruited somebody recently, the pay we were offering wasn't enough and we needed to go out and do that. But the person they were recruiting was somebody for the head of the HSE. So they say, well, the HSE, we had to put their pay up. And when we put their pay up, we're going to have to put the Secretary General's pay up. Yeah, and I go, well, this is a circular argument. And like suddenly now, so you're going to have one Secretary General of one department on one pay rate. And now it's always been accepted that there is a small hierarchy. So you've got the Department of the Taoiseach, the Department of Finance.
But it's got a bit of OT now, isn't it?
But now we're going the whole way down. It's just so, I mean, is this going to be linked to your annual budget? Is this going to be linked to the number of personnel working under you? Is this going to be linked to this? And if you're doing that with Secretary Generals, well, why don't you do it with ministers? So if you do it with ministers, why don't you? I mean,
okay.
Also, there's been movement between departments. There has been a lot of movement, like the outgoing Secretary General of the Department of Health had previously been the Secretary General of the Department of Children, and had previously been the Assistant Secretary General of the Department of Health. So there's movement. So now, but there was movement because everyone were on the same pay scale. Now you have this new pay scale. So do people move up into that? Do they move out into that? Do they move down?
Yeah.
I just think it's a HR disaster.
And also now it's like a wage race, salary race. Then it becomes like
it is, but it's again, which is like it's stuff actually that maybe comes up to the rest of which is like, well, where is the value for money for the state in this one? Where is somebody turning around and saying, well, hang a second. There are comparisons to be made, which is if we're finding it difficult to get somebody to do the job as Secretary General of the Department of Health for 220,000 a year, well, the head of the World Health Organization earns 190-something thousand a year. Maybe we need to look slightly wider. I don't know.
Well, yeah, we've been saying this for 10 years.
We've always said that, but this is an argument which is, if we don't pay that, we're not going to get people in to apply for it. That was the argument with the head of the HSE. And I say, well, maybe the issue was that you made the job almost impossible to do for the preceding decade.
Yeah. Also, it's like kind of, the BBC want to post Tubridy. Not really, kind of. Yeah. It's
I'm not even touching the RTE stuff.
Okay. Vulnerable maybe moved up vaccine list. I understand.
Yeah, this is which is talking about this having again look at the priority list, which makes a large degree of sense. Just a bit of a personal kind of aside, which is two friends of mine who live in the north of France, and in France, where the rollout is said to be slower than here. These people, because they both have health conditions, one of them was vaccinated today, and the other friend of mine is due to be vaccinated in 2 weeks' time. Now they live in France. They're living there about 10 years, and they're in the French healthcare system. But if they were here, they wouldn't have got a phone call so far. So
I understand 80,000 people have been vaccinated. Not all of those.
Well, I think the plan is to vaccinate. What the HSE is saying that their plan is that this is a bumper week of vaccinations. They intend to vaccinate 80,000 people. That's great news.
But mostly
that shouldn't just be exception. That should be the standard. We should be looking at doing. I mean, like they're doing 100 and something thousand in the north a week. I mean, like, I don't think 80,000 is unreasonable as a baseline. Never mind as a target.
Derek, the Mother and Baby Home Commission.
This is dissolved.
It's dissolved at the end of February.
Yeah.
It's dissolved on February the 28th, and there now fears that the commissioners will resign en masse if its terms.
This is a real headache for the Minister Rodrigo Gorman. I mean, this has been a hot potato since he got in there, and I accept totally that the man is inheriting things that long preceded him. Again, this is the destruction of the archive of the interviews, and there's a big demand, totally understandable, completely understandable from the people concerned, saying, look, we want an investigation. We want the commission to investigate why were these destroyed.
Yeah.
The commission is now hasn't given them an answer as to why it's been destroyed, but it's also basically saying, look, if you extend our remit, our commissioners will resign. Because they don't want to, and this is we seem to be focused on the process rather than the central people who are the victims and what's happening for them. And again, we're having this incredible focus on process, and it seems to be a huge failure of the administration of this.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, I don't know if I knew what the resolution for it was, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be sitting elsewhere, but it really appears to be a mess, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better. And it's one of those ones where you have sympathy with everyone involved, including the minister, kind of going, how in the name of God can you cope with this?
Well,
it's like trying to, it's just slipping through his fingers at every hand's turn, which was first the data protection argument, which wasn't an argument last year.
Yeah.
Then the release of the report, then the appearance in the newspaper, then the manner in which it's communicated to the victims, and now this.
Yes, and what's to stop him appointing new commissioners? And
well, the process is then that you start the clock again in terms of the looking into this, because the commissioners will have gone. The architecture that's there, I assume, that would been able to very quickly kind of go back in and explore where this has happened. And if it happened during its time, it happened during its remit, it shouldn't be that complicated to explain who made the decision and how this decision was made.
But
why do you have to bring in a new group of people who then have to be brought up to speed, go and investigate, go check it out, now contact their predecessors to find out what did they know and when did they know it?
Yeah.
And how many lawyers are you going to have involved in this process from start to finish?
And it's interesting because the commissioner themselves have delayed this like 6 times, 7 times, maybe.
Well, again, I haven't looked into it in such a detail as that kind of to point the finger that way, but none of this has been. I mean, like this, the one thing the state has done over the last 2 decades, it's done a lot of commissions of inquiry. There is a system for doing this, and like we went back to the old tribunal system, the rest of us, when this new system was brought in. It's not. I can't remember if it's the one that specifically came in by Michael McDowell's Minister for Justice, which was a more streamlined, slicker, less combative, more conciliatory, more mediatory process. And we've seen it work effectively. And why is it so problematic in this one? Why is this just every hand's turn when there's a difficulty? Does it become an exceptionally complicated difficulty?
Well, it's a massive cover-up, really. It's trafficking, ultimately.
Whether it's that or I'm not going to speculate. But what I'm saying is that this is just so bad on so many levels. And again, which is the one thing we'd learned from previous tribunals, the one thing we'd learned from previous commissions, one thing we'd learned from was the victims need to be at the center of it. That this is kind of what is needed to what do they need to know?
Yeah.
That's what drives it. This appears to be where the commission now appears to have as much skin in the game as anyone else. You kind of go, why? Why is this?
I mean, it is really tragic, Derek.
It is. The whole thing has now become combative and has become, in a way, it shouldn't have been. Like the whole reason you wanted to take this out of the court system was the court system is combative. The court system is adversarial.
Yeah.
You wanted to take out the adversarial, and this is now becoming the commission against everyone. And it's
we had a post today, Derek, on a lady called Anne Silk, who was a survivor who died sadly before she could read the report. Even her daughter said she probably couldn't even pick it up. It was so that the report was.
It is, and it was it wasn't user friendly. Should we put it delicately?
Yeah. I mean, anyway. We could
and a lot of these things, the most important, like the stuff I know from dealing with the North and the rest of it, it's the importance of people telling their stories, the importance of people being heard and telling their story and having their story heard, uninterrupted, unexpurgated, and getting what they heard.
And not edited. This is just wanted to show you this, Derek.
I was actually looking at this thread earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, certain media weren't allowed.
It seemed to be resolved by a senior journalist turning around and saying, "If they're not let in, I'm not coming."
Yeah. Okay. Who was that? Who was that?
I have no idea. I presume it will be the doyen of health journalists, would be my guess, but that'd be pure speculation. This is just such a bad look. I mean, this is. Like the whole point of it, I've been drumming on about this for a couple of weeks about the importance of getting the information about vaccinations out there. And if you're going to have a public information campaign, okay, I know there are restrictions. I know there are difficulties letting everyone into the room. I know there are difficulties getting the focus in and stuff.
Yeah.
But this absolute need to control it. And I don't know whether this is at the ministerial behest or whatever, but it doesn't look good. And this is now becoming a pattern of behavior rather than the exception to it.
Yeah, I mean, Donnelly, it's completely hapless stuff, isn't it? What's the feeling among Fianna Fáiles?
I don't know. They don't talk to me about him. But that's what the line, which is how are things at the Freedom of Information campaign? I'm sorry, we can't talk about that. Which is a very bright guy, very intelligent guy, but possibly not the most politically astute, maybe not the most politically aware, maybe not the most politically attuned individual.
More corporate than political.
Maybe not corporate. I would have thought managerial.
McKinsey.
McKinsey's by all accounts, like a very, very bright guy in McKinsey's and really good at systems analysis and process. And like his speciality had been in healthcare systems. And I mean, there's a big argument that said he was unfortunate, which is he'd come in there ready to do a big health reorganization. And then find himself in the middle of a pandemic and all his plans gone awry. But still, I think that's politics.
Right. Was that the plan? Yeah, he was going to come in and
do
another. What was it? Abolish HSE and just bring it back into the parliament.
I'm not. Oh Lord, I wouldn't even say. No, it was basically going to be based on the stauncher care measures and the rest of it, which was to kind of to streamline rather than having the complete two-tier system. It was to kind of streamline and have a greater integration. But that's again, which is, it's just turned into an unholy mess. And the problem about this is that the money needed to do this at the end of this year, next year, ain't going to be there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Dave Drum is.
It's also the other saying this is the end of Anglo-Irish. I don't think it is. It's the Anglo-Irish saga, but yeah.
He's done his time, I guess.
That's the essence of the criminal justice process, is that you do your time and you come out, and there's not quite the slate is wiped clean, but everyone's entitled to a future.
The Evening Echo, pupils are suffering. Children in Cork are trying to learn from home in emergency accommodation, unheated homes, and with lack of necessary equipment.
Again, which is, by the way, this kind of the digital poverty and the kind of people who access even that's just a set iPads, computers. Well, most schools are quite capable of doing this, but it is becoming an issue. And again, this is part of the K-shaped recovery. When this is over, some people will be able to recover quickly, and others are going to have found themselves slipping further behind.
Right. What did you call it? K-shaped?
A K-shaped recovery, yeah.
Okay.
Because people said it was going to be a V-shaped recovery, there would be a deep dip, but would come back up sharply. Now it's K, which is that there will be two cohorts in society. Those whose jobs have effectively been on PUP and the rest were going to take a long time to get back into work. And those who've been able to work from home, been able to adapt quickly, who've managed to cut their costs, who may be able to move down the country and save money and all the rest of blah, blah, blah. And they're people who will recover much quicker.
The Irish World, Bernard Purcell's newspaper, he edits the paper for the Irish in Britain. GA Club, a whole fundraiser for its own NHS players, quite a nice story. The London GA Club has shown its gratitude to players who are NHS nurses and medics by raising the funds to pay for their professional fees.
Yeah, again, look, which is, we think that there's problems with health funding here, but the NHS is a great model, but still people need to, you still find yourself having to do fundraisers to raise money for staff, etc.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the story, but it looks very good. GA in Britain pledges support to King family and is about to have an Irish inscription on the headstone of the late Mum Margaret. She was a long-serving member and volunteer of Roger Caseman's GA Club in Coventry. Margaret passed away in 2018. She was 73. The family is appealing the ruling last year of the Chancellor of the Diocese of Coventry, prohibiting them from having the words, in our grey Godia, in our hearts forever.
Oh.
Yeah, this was, they didn't want a foreign language on a headstone. But
well, again, which is, that's grand. It's not the bishop who's going down to the gravestone what is it? Listen, the famous one, which is Spike Milligan's inscription, is in Irish, and it says, "I told you I was ill."
Was it? I thought I can mix it up with Richard Harris. Don't try the veal or something when he's leaving.
That was he was being carried out of that. He I think he spent his last weeks in the Savoy, and they were bringing him to the hospital for the last journey. And he started shouting as they were bringing him across on the gurney. Don't eat the veal.
Don't try the brie. The Daily Telegraph, Johnson, this must be the final lockdown. Hostage to fortune there. Speaking of hostage,
but I think that's probably a preamble to this one extending out longer than maybe people thought. Certainly talking to friends of mine in the UK and the North, there was a kind of an expectation that once they get into March, the process of coming out of the lockdown will begin. Particularly when they've had so many people vaccinated, there now seems to be coming back and saying, well, look, maybe we need to revisit that. So this might be preparing people to say, well, look, if we can end the lockdown now and run the risk of having a second one or a fourth one or fifth one, or we can extend this one out and make sure this is the last lockdown. So I wonder, is this part of the preparations for this going on till April in the UK?
This lady is at a hotel window.
I think I think the Sun or one of the other papers has a montage of various people who are not happy.
Yeah, I think it's down here actually.
Yeah, but it's understandable. I mean, I wouldn't be.
There they are. Yeah.
Having said that, I would happily go to a hotel now, only on the basis that I get room service and be able to wander down to the bar. I'm been locked in a small room.
Yeah, with like a croissant and Oh,
I mean, it's fairly industrial food that you've been served up, and it's been a tray dropped outside your door.
And these are perfectly healthy people, Derek.
Oh no, there is, but again, this is about the isolation. This is about it is a difficult process. I mean,
but there might be some sort of compensation payments. I mean, these people, this is distressing stuff, isn't it?
I'm not okay. I think distressing is putting it on the far end of it, etc. It is one of the. Why are people traveling? I presume for work or for family needs, for some essential purposes. It is now part of the additional burden of doing that. Look, as I said, and when I traveled to see my mother last year, I basically agreed. Now going over to Spain, there was no requirement. Coming back, you needed to self-isolate for 10 days or for 14 days on the way back. Now, that's very easy to do in my own home. If I was going to Spain and I had to self-isolate before meeting my mother somewhere in a hotel, then I would have seriously revisited the advisability of going over.
Right.
And I think the purpose of this is to discourage travel as far as possible. That seems to be to get people not to travel. But I think there's I don't know, was it one of the other papers today or something that's on the rest of which is Ireland, more than any other country, has a big stake in the aviation game. There's about 150,000 Irish people employed in aviation in various shapes, makes, or form. If the aviation industry, like this is the second summer where there's been no aviation industry, that is going to be decimating. That is seriously going to hit. And when we make jokey references to Ryanair and Jab and Fly and all the rest of it, this is a big sector for Ireland, and it is going to cost, and the bills are mounting up.
Okay, and they haven't got it through cabinet yet, or whether they will, I'm not too sure.
My understanding is that Stephen Donnelly seemed to be saying at that press conference where only whatever number of people attended under duress and with blindfolds or whatever, saying that I think he's intended to bring that he has the draft legislation that heads the bill to go to government tomorrow. Doing that. Again, look, the argument I think is strange enough. I wouldn't argue against it. I would say, listen, lads, we're maybe but 3 to 6 to 9 months late on this. Like, I mean, again, which is you need to clamp down. I mean, that's.
But that's it, isn't it? I mean, that
it is. I mean, but look, we are like the argument. I think the argument from the government's point of view is that you now have this new variant, which is highly more infectious, highly more contagious, highly more. Yeah, well, the original COVID was kind of fairly doing damage itself, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's something else going on clearly. I mean,
no,
in the sense that
I don't think there's anything. I think a lot of this is the government been very slow to act and having been very resistant to it. And there seemed to be a genuine resistance from NEFIT and others to saying, well, look, we don't think it's advisable. The problem is this maybe being seen to encourage traveling and saying you can do it, you can do it this if you can have a test and the rest of it. There are various models of it around the place as well, because I think I spoke previously about a friend of mine who was went to the Middle East and the rest of it. So you get a PCR test, you arrive, you get a PCR test 5 days later. If you're cleared, then you're free, you're okay to go. Well, in the meantime, you're tracked and monitored in your location. So.
But you'd accept that, like, Donnelly's not making these decisions. You know, it wasn't his idea that mandatory.
I think there is. I mean, I think that there is a large element these decisions have been made. By the way, but if he was making decisions, then we'd all be jumping up and down and saying, well, why aren't you listening to expert advice? Now the question is, you listen to expert advice, which are that we've agreed that the experts, I don't think we've all agreed, but the consensus is that the advisors here will be NEFIT. But there are other people outside who will turn around and say, well, no, we have a slightly different view. And it's as well educated view. And it comes from both sides, because there are people on the zero COVID side said, look, if you have a quick clampdown now, you can actually come out of this like New Zealand. And even the fact that New Zealand did have to go into a 3-day lockdown, or Auckland, I can't remember one of the cities going into a 3-day Auckland or Wellington.
Yeah, because one person died, or 3 people died.
There's 3 cases, but 3 cases becomes 60 cases, 60 cases, and the rest of it. So I mean, it's
3 cases, and then they closed it down again.
Yeah, they've only closed it down for 3 days, in fairness. I mean, so it's not exactly it's Armageddon.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think this. The quarantine hotel idea, for instance, is a global idea. It seems to have come from.
Oh no, it's absolutely right. It's popped up in a lot of other places. The rest of it, and it's Australia in particular. I think was one of the biggest advocates of it. I think in the early stages.
Yeah.
And I think even happened within it was Victoria, but I can't remember one of the territories there. It had become was raging seriously, and they basically clamped down on everything else. So it was all travel.
Derek, we're sort of running out of time, but there's a small story on the cover of the Financial Times. Smaller ports thrive as Irish freight bypasses UK. French and Irish ports serving direct ferry routes between the countries are booming as freight carries on the once dominant UK land bridge.
Yeah. And this isn't a temporary phenomenon. This is going to be right throughout the rest of it, because there is going to be because I mean, which is, don't forget,
that's great. That's good news.
It is good news. Problem is number one, I think we've underinvested in Rosslare. I argued maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, saying, listen, guys, we need to spend serious money on Rosslare. Rosslare is our shortest point.
Yeah.
Now there are new services. Rosslare had huge spare capacity, so I mean but I think Rosslare is like, we need to start thinking about Rosslare eventually as something like Zeebrugge or Rotterdam. Where it won't just be the roll on, roll off, it'll also be the kind of containerized traffic, etc. And to build the infrastructure around it, to make the connectivity, it can't just be one train line, etc. Now this is something for the long term, but I mean, we need to seriously look at that. But it's good news. There is preparation. In fairness, I'm not saying the government wasn't prepared. It certainly was. I would argue that they maybe should have done more, but that's just me, maybe we've just been contrarian. But you saw that there's a new connection to Dunkirk. Strange enough, when that is up and running, that will be one of the joys of my life, because
you drive then.
If I can get it, I can get it straight over to Dunkirk. I have lots of friends within literally a 10-mile radius of Dunkirk.
Yeah.
So like for me, it's going to be an absolute godsend.
How long would the crossing be?
I think it's 19 hours or something like that. So like it's, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a wee bit civilized. I mean,
Yeah,
like I sit there. I mean, we see with this. I mean, I think it's one of the Danish freight companies when they're operating it.
Yeah.
They're operating it purely as a freight line, but their intention was at the summer to operate it as a passenger element. That clearly won't probably kick in until September, October. But again, there's connections now to Zeebrugge, to Rotterdam, etc. And it's now. It's not nearly as efficient as the land bridge. The land bridge was still only 14 hours maximum, as far as I know.
Yeah, but I think with the flights and everything, I think the ferries are going to take a real boost now, aren't they? I mean, people driving.
They will, but you still have to get to that point, which is it's fine now for them. The rest of which is, look at me. That I assume when we do come out of this that there will be return to people wanting to travel and travel abroad. I think that demand is so pent up.
Yeah,
and that there will be, but it's just about when can people say this and when can people deal with it. And
when you go to Spain, if you would drive to Spain, for instance, would you go to Santander or?
Yeah, you can. I think there's a service from I think it's from Cork and from Rosslare goes to Bilbao or something like that, or maybe Santander. I can't remember.
But do you ever drive down to Mooney?
No. If anyone's ever travelled in the car with me, they'll never travel with me. And horrendous. Jesus, I'm bad enough at this side of the road. Imagine me on the other side.
What about Trump's acquittal? Derek, finally.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, technically an acquittal, but because they didn't get the 2/3 majority, but at the end of the day, it was 57 votes against him. So I thought there was a lot of criticism of the Democratic House managers for the handles. When you actually look at the case, I think they put together an extremely watertight case, and it's quite clearly they put the case together for people at home. It wasn't they knew that they were limited what they can convince in the room. The most extraordinary performance was Mitch McConnell, who votes to acquit and then gets up and explains in very, very stark language why the man is guilty of sin.
Yeah.
And Mitch McConnell basically seemed to say, lads, this is a criminal action. The court should go after him. This guy should end up in prison.
Yeah, he's a joke, Mitch. I got to say, I mean,
Well, you can see what he's trying to do is hold the Republican Party together and to have sufficient grasp on it himself that there is something there when Trump's grip eventually slips, which is not going to be very soon, but it'll happen in time.
Well,
because there's a string of court actions now in Georgia, in Florida, and in New York against Trump, criminal actions, which will slowly return. But I think they're now saying that they're preparing for Trump doing a public engagement for the next 10 days or so.
Yeah,
to hold a rally or something. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll watch that space. Vegas still haven't paid out. March 5th, they're going to pay out on Biden. So the bookies still, we'll watch that space with
I don't know who bought it. I got the money on Biden.
Yeah, that's Paddy Power in Vegas now.
Yeah,
they're holdouts. Derek, thanks a lot. See you.
No problem.